reviewing with air quotes a bunch of books on living vampirism, Vampyre Magick, etc. There will be 3 categories that a book can fall under in this case, and those are mixed, which is where some of you will get on with it and some of you might not. We also have worth a read. Even if you don't agree with every single bit in it, it's worth a read anyway, because there's like a lot of information that you can take out of it which will probably be of use to most of you anyway. And there's recommended, which is I recommend it. It's got lots of information in it. A lot of these will probably also be mundane friendly for living vampires and for just curious folks. These are great for. No super confusing terminology, easy to pick up, easy to understand. Okay, so without further ado. Okay, so the first book that we're going to review is the Asetian Bible by Louis Marquez, the Comedic Order of the Ahkkharu. I want to put this in recommended straight away because I love this book. There's some metaphysics at the beginning, like some ancient Egyptian vampire metaphysics at the beginning that not all of you are going to get along with, but the rest of the book, really well written, quite beginner friendly as well. It's got like thorough explanations of certain things. It does have some ancient Egyptian names for certain energy work things, such as the chakras for some reason are named Shens because it's like the Egyptian word, but that's like the whole thing of this book is comedic vampirism, which is quite a big theme in a lot of these Vampyre Magick books actually. If you can get past the Egyptian stuff, then yeah, it is a good book. It like explains energy work, it explains different forms of energy, how to take different forms of energy, and it explains them in a relatively beginner-friendly way. No necessarily fancy words or anything, it just explains what they are, what they do, how to do it. And then hey presto, read about it, learn about it, do the thing, enjoy the thing, done. I also like how it explains vampirism as like a spiritual experience. Vampires are biologically human, but they don't always feel necessarily 100% human. There's like something else there. I know that's not like all of us, but just an added bonus. Okay, before I go on for too long, I'm going to go on to the next book. The Vampire's Bible, or The Moroi Book of V, by Joshua Free, who I will start off by admitting is a very hit and miss author for me. Some of the stuff I get on with, some of the stuff I don't. So for that reason, a lot of you are probably thinking that I will put it in mixed. I'm going to put it in worth a read, actually, because there might be stuff in there that you don't get on with, and there might be like some confusing words, like for some reason instead of using the word energy, they use starfire because it sounds cooler, but it's energy, it's just a fancy word for energy, and possibly also a superhero. The layout's also a little bit weird as well, because one chapter will mention, oh yeah, you have to collect the energies, also known as starfire, and it'll go into starfire, and it'll go into the word for chakras, which I forget what word they use, but it's not chakra, it's like some fancy word they use because it sounds cool. They talk about it, but they don't explain what it is until like chapter 3, which is a bit odd. But yeah, there is some stuff in there that you will probably get along with. The energy explanations are pretty decent. It goes into the whole, like, Moroi beat him thing a little hard, but if you can get past it, the explanations are pretty good. There are a few, and I do mean a few, it's not a Vampyre Magick book, it's like an explanation book. 2 activities of like, oh yeah, how you can sense your energy. There's quite a few vampirism books that do that, but it's nice to add, just in case you haven't read the others. We'll say that the fictional vampire lore and the parts on the gothic subculture might not have been needed in a book about vampirism. Take it or leave it, whether you want to read it or not. But if not, skip to, part 2 of the book. But the Lilith and Cain information is interesting though. I don't know how much of the Cain information is true, because I feel like a lot of Cain information has been muddied a little by, like, Vampire the Masquerade. So take the Cain information with a grain of salt, because I don't know how much of that is actually true. You take most of the lore with a grain of salt. But if you're there just for the vampirism explanations and the energy work, good. Before I go on to the next book, actually, you may remember, if you've watched my Altar Tour video, I turned around and said about alternate elemental colours. This is actually the book that I got it from. I couldn't remember at the time, but there you go, that's the book that I got that from. Okay, next book on the list is... I don't actually have this one. I used to have this one, I just want to mention it briefly, or as briefly as I can, but the Psychic Vampire Codex. You know the one, most likely. Hear me out, I'm going to put this in mixed, and there is a reason I'm going to put this in mixed. It's a good book, don't get me wrong, but it's a bit long-winded, and the reason I say that is because there are other books out there. I know this technically was like probably one of the first ones, and that's why it's like in such high regard, I understand that. But now there is a lot of books on psychic vampirism and energy work from a psychic vampire's perspective that are a lot shorter, a lot simpler, to the point, a lot less sort of like, I want to say fluffed out. Yeah, overall, it is a good book. It just seems a bit padded in my experience. So, if you want one from a more neutral vampirism point of view, rather than like the psychic vampire bias, there is the 20th anniversary edition. It's just called Vampire Codex, but I do warn you, a lot of it is scanned and handwritten, so if that's not your thing, I'm just letting you know that that's how that book is. If you want less psychic vampirism explanations, for whatever reason, and you want more developing your psychic senses and your clairsenses, there is, which I feel like this book is a bit slept on, to be honest, compared to the other two, the Psychic Energy Codex, same author, so you can give that one a look at if that's more your speed. Moving on to the next book. Technically, these are two books, but they basically achieve the same thing, but different sides of the coin, and those are The Ethical Psychic Vampire by Raven Caldera, and Lady CG's Practical Vampirism for Modern Vampires. One is more for psychic vampirism, one is more for sanguinarians. Relatively the same, it's just whether you prefer blood or prana. Evans goes into how to detect your energy, and the types of energy, ways to get said energy, ways to protect from people trying to get your energy. It's written from the perspective of someone who is a psychic vampire, but in a relatively beginner-friendly way, to the point where you can probably give someone who knows a psychic vampire this book and they'll be like, oh, so this is what this is. Okay, I understand this now. A beginner-friendly guidebook. Whichever one you are, you will benefit from something from this book. So I will put this in recommended. I'll also put Lady CG's Practical Vampirism for Modern Vampires in recommended as well, because it's basically the same premise except for sanguinarian vampires, which are the blood-drinking ones. Whatever your opinion of them, those people are out there. It goes into donors, how to look after your donors, the rights of said donors, substitutes, some interesting meditation practices in there as well. I don't know how good those are because I haven't tried them, but if you're into that, they're in there as well. And basically, like Raven Caldera's Psychic Vampires, it gives explanations as to what a sanguinarian vampire is, and beginner-friendly, whether you're a sanguinarian vampire and you're just interested in the perspective. Decent book, would recommend. Okay, next up we have two books again, but they're basically the same thing. We have the Khephrian Ritual Archives and the Vampire Ritual book. I'm going to put these in mixed. Because yes, it's Vampyre Magick, finally. We're away from explanation, theory, lore, how to deal with blah blah blah. We're actually onto magic. But I'm going to put them in mixed because it depends on what you're looking for, really. And I think a lot of the Vampyre Magick books, if not all of them, are going to go in mixed. Some of the rites and rituals you will probably get on with, and others you probably won't. It all depends on the individual and what you're specifically looking for in your Vampyre Magick. Khephrian Ritual Archives has a lot of holiday rites, which is cool. It also has solitary versions of said rites, just in case you're not in a group or coven or a witchy gathering. Which is nice, that they also have solitary versions, which is the problem I think I have with the Vampire Ritual book, is that it doesn't. We have things from an ancestor rite, except for anyone living or who is sadly passed. We also have, I like the fact that you write attendees and people who can't attend's names down on a scroll, and then you say, we bless you, we hear you, we call you by name. But before I go on too much, the reason it's mixed is because some of you are bound to like at least one or two things, and some of you might not like much from it, so that's why. Anyway, moving on to the next book, Vampiric Prayers, a Book of Dark Enchantments by Wander Augusto. I'm going to put this in recommended, even though this does come with a disclaimer that this is more on the vampire as an archetype rather than like actual proper vampiric magic. But despite that fact, I've tried some of these out and I really happen to like them. I really happen to like the imagery and all the sort of like, it's sort of ceremonial magic, so if you're into that, then you'll probably get on with this quite well. But yeah, you have everything from scrying with the aid of a vampire, to enchanting an item to help you with your vampirism, to using the darkness as a protective cloak against like negativity and people trying to like steal your thunder, to what is essentially glamour magic / glamoury. So there's something in there for everyone, which is great. Okay, moving on, next up we have, try not to butcher this, Vampyros Magicae, I think is how it's pronounced, by Asetian. Putting this one in mixed purely because it's a little bit funky. I feel like it's more chaos magic with some vampirism mixed in rather than like proper vampirism, but some people might like it, so I'm not really sure how to feel on this one. Some parts of it I like, and then some parts of it I'm not sure on. You might get on with it better than I did. It's good, don't get me wrong. When I explain some of the things in the book, you'll probably understand what I mean by chaos magic with vampirism mixed in. There's a thing in it called Khephrian magic, which is basically, phosphines are basically like little, like, you know when you rub your eyes too hard and you see all the funky shapes, or when you stare at a light for too long and you see like the patterns, the colourful patterns. Khephrian magic is basically that, but you stare at a sigil for long enough that you see the sigil in front of your eyes, and you use that to visualize what you want to do on a person. For example, you make a sigil to help you drain the energy of a person, with consent, of course, and you would use the Khephrian way to stare at the sigil, have the sigil like appear on their face, and in theory that would help you to take the energy in this case. Sounds a bit like psychic vampirism chaos magic to me, to be honest. Do like that dark Reiki is mentioned as well. I don't like that it's called dark Reiki, because it technically isn't Reiki, because instead of using the symbols to put energy into a person, you are using it to vampirize and take energy from a person. But as there's no decent name for this yet, it's just called dark Reiki. Like that this is mentioned though, because it is a technique that a lot of psychic vampires do tend to use consensually on a donor that is willing to give you some psychic energy. So it's really nice that this was included, as this seems to be sort of like a technique that a lot of us use now. Think of it as a branch off of contact feeding, if it helps. Okay, next up, I'm going to put these two together as well, because they're basically the same thing except part 1 and part 2 in a sense. Sekhem, Apep and Ahkkharu. Some of you might know what these are. Michael W. Ford. Don't really have an opinion of him, to be honest, but I wanted to put these on there anyway. I'm going to put these in mixed. Style of vampirism is rather different. It kind of comes off of things such as draconian magic, and as he describes, Luciferian vampirism. There's some demonolatry in there as well, so it's vampirism with hints of other things, which is fine if you're into that. Can come across as a little edgy, I understand that. There are parts I looked at and I'm just like, this seems a little like edgy for the sake of being I am edgy Satanist. It is what it is. I was into energy work, but it also has some interesting theories on obtaining certain energies other than like the ways of feeding, as most psychic vampirism books do. Things such as adrenaline, for instance, it theorizes is a good thing to feed from. Things like riding a roller coaster generates this sort of like energy. In theory, you can feed from said energy. It also goes into chaos magic territory by creating vampiric servitors and using astral projection in order to feed from someone via like dreams. That's your thing, it's got that as well. But yeah, that's all the books I wanted to go on about today, so I will see you in a future video.